Hello out there to all you loyal listeners out on the internet. Welcome to episode 67 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week's guest is James Powell, the writer of House of Fear, an all-ages horror anthology comic. There are 3 issues of House of Fear out right now, each dealing with different horrors, including Lovecraftian creatures, haunted houses, and snowmen? You know, I assure you, they're all pretty creepy, although not scary enough to give your kids nightmares, so James has found a really nice sweet spot here. Quick note on this episode, James mentions plans for an upcoming Kickstarter. Those have changed a bit since the time of this recording, but suffice it to say that there is more House of Fear coming in the near future. James was kind enough to set up a special offer for Funny Book Splatter listeners. If you go to 1031publishing.com, that's TEN, the number 3, the number 1, publishing.com/funny-book-splatter. So it's Funny Book Splatter with dashes in between. This will be linked in the show notes. Anyway, if you sign up for his newsletter there on that page, you will receive digital copies of all 3 current House of Fear comics. I can speak from experience in saying James's newsletter is pretty solid. Most recently, he offered a sneak peek into an upcoming issue, so it is well worth checking out. More information about House of Fear can be found online at the official website, 1031publishing.com, on Twitter at 1031publishing, or at facebook.com/1031publishing. In other news, you may have seen the headlines that Infidel from last week's guest Pornsack T-Shed Choate and Aaron Campbell is heading to the big screen. Michael Sugar and TriStar will adapt the series into a film. This is great news for horror fans. As excited as I am to see how Infidel wraps up, I am just as interested to see how it will look as a movie. Congratulations, guys. Alright, that is it for the news and updates. Now let's start up episode 67 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, James Powell. To start us off, the way I like to start the show is really just asking you to pitch your book. So if you had to describe House of Fear to somebody, whether they were on a convention floor or, you got stuck with them in the elevator, how would you describe the book to them?
So when I'm at a convention, the first thing I say is House of Fear is Scooby-Doo meets Tales from the Crypt.
Nice.
The reason I say it that way is because everybody knows those 2 properties, obviously, but it shows that, hey, it's for kids, Scooby-Doo, and, Tales from the Crypt is more of an anthology type series. It's scary. And my goal right now with House of Fear is complete standalone stories. So anyone can come to a convention or find me online and pick one story. It's complete. You don't have to find a part 2. There's no cliffhangers or anything like that. So I kind of like the idea of combining, like I said, Scooby-Doo with Tales from the Crypt, just because Tales from the Crypt, like Twilight Zone, they're kind of those anthology series that standalone shows, TV episodes. And then what I do beyond that, once I get someone interested in talking to me, I pitch each individual story and say what the bad guy is, or gauged on, I look at the kids that are with the parents, or I ask the parents how old their kids are, and kind of pitch a certain story to that group. Because each issue, my goal for, sorry,
keep going.
I can talk about this today, but,
that's the idea.
Right now, my goal for the series is, ages 7 to about 12. So the kids who go trick-or-treating, basically. So with that in mind, I kind of get the parents interested in the idea and say, hey, these are good stories for kids that age group. So there's no blood, there's no gore. It's not, Freddy Krueger or, Jason Voorhees or anything. It's just Scooby-Doo. Yeah. So I keep going back to that. But at the same time, I know plenty of people who love Scooby-Doo as an adult. I like reading the comics. I still watch the show with my son. So that kind of insinuates that, hey, these are good quality stories for adults too. Yeah.
And it's not to discount it. It's still a horror book in that, there's still some, scary elements. There's monsters. There's different kind of creatures involved. So it still kind of scratches that itch without being too scary. You're not going to see someone's head get cut off or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. To some degree, it's, they're adventure stories masquerading as horror stories.
Yeah, I definitely got that vibe when I was reading through them. I was like, yeah, it is like an adventure. It's like the Goonies, but with a Shoggoth. It's.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So my goal, with that is that we take a horror element, like the first issue was a scary ghost. I've got a witch coming up. But my goal is to take those elements and give them to a kid, at the kid level with kid gloves. Horror with kid gloves, I guess, is another way to pitch it. But at the same time, my goal is to push the envelope just a little bit. Each issue, there's a scene or a panel or a theme that's going on that just hints at a little bit of scary, more than what a 7-year-old might be used to with what he may or not, be reading in class or whatever. The way I kind of like to think about it is that I'm creating comics that are not a gateway drug exactly, but I want to get my son interested in scary movies so that when he's 14, he can go see some scary movies with me. So I kind of want to guide him there, without, I don't want to put him down in front of some horrific show to start, when he's 11 or whatever. I don't want to say, let's go watch a horror movie. Here it is. And it's, he's cowering. I kind of want to, my goal is to kind of guide him along. He's 8 now. So kind of guide him along with, hints and, teases of what horror can be, so that by the time he's 10, he kind of has an understanding of what to expect when he actually sits down and sees something, actually scary to you and me.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because that is an audience that's really, like, underserved in the marketplace in general. Like, comic books in general, but also, like, the horror genre. Like, it's something that I feel like most of us come to, like, in the teenage years, and we recognize it. But, kids love monsters. Like, it's just something cool about them. They're weird and different, and, there's all different kinds of them. And they just gravitate towards them. And it's something like, I have a 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, and they're both, like, they'll find, this weird little stuff on Netflix and stuff, and it's like, just edging into the horror stuff, but they just eat it up. So I can see that. So a book like House of Fear is awesome for parents to, like, that are into horror, that want to share this with their kids, but understand, like, all right, I have to wait before, like, otherwise I'm going to get, like, a letter from Child Protective Services and take my kid away because I'm showing them horror stuff.
Right. And I think that's, as far as a creator, my end reader is the kids, but at the same time, I'm selling it to the parents. So it's one of those things I have to prove to the parents that it's a quality story, that the kids won't get nightmares, but at the same time, it's kind of, like I said, pushing towards the scary stuff. But at the same time, it needs to be fun and actiony, have enough action. Did I just say actiony?
Yeah, it's a word. That's fine.
So it has to be enough action. It has to be enough, like you said, I need to have a big monster in there, to kind of get the kids engaged. So, as far as creating these go, it's the fine line between the two. I can't make it too scary for the kids because there are, theoretically some nightmares going on, or a parent, I don't want to get a call. Hey, this is way too scary. What are you doing? You sold me this it's good for an 8-year-old, and I gave it to a 9-year-old and he's crying or whatever. I can't do that. So it's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah, but I think I think you hit the nail on the head with the adventure quality to it, because, like, you put it in there, the kids are put in these situations where it's like, that's like any kid, like they could easily see themselves as these characters, where it's just like, they're looking for, a Halloween carnival, or they're building a snowman, and, like, these things just kind of pop up, and it's like, yeah, like, I've done those things. I could see, what would I have done in those kind of situations, and it kind of puts the kid in that idea of seeing themselves on the page, and I think that resonates a lot more.
No, I completely agree, and I think, like, with the snowman, the Attack of the Killer Snowmen, when I was creating that one, I used, to be honest with you, and you might have seen this a little bit, I used Calvin and Hobbes as inspiration.
Yeah, you can see that a bit. But it's like, they're not running around with a stuffed tiger or something, but, like, you have that kind of, like, flair to it.
Exactly. So I kind of pictured it as almost like, I remember myself as a kid, or even making snowmen with my son now. We just automatically create a story. What if this guy was an alien and he's here to eat us, mm-hmm. or what if he's this sort of monster? So I kind of took that and made it more reality. I guess in theory, now that, I start thinking about it in a different way, maybe, we could read that issue as these kids just making it up and having a little fun with another kid who's making the snowman.
Yeah, that adds another element to it, because, you could almost do that with almost any story, especially involving kids, because it's like, all right, was this all just in their head? Did they all just make it all up? But, no, it's real to them regardless of what happens.
Right, exactly. And I'm finding, I have, like I said earlier, I have a couple of issues written already, and Jethro's drawing them now. What I like to do is when the parents come into play, the parents always doubt the kids.
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about? There's no monster. There's no ghost. So that way that there's that element of, did that really happen? Was that in their head? Were they just playing?
Yeah.
But to a kid, it's just, oh, what happened? There was this snowman monster.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, exactly. So
I think the fact that you're making them, like with your own son in mind is kind of elevates the overall process, because like you have a personal stake in it. It's not just, well, I want to make kids comics because, kids comics sell. It's that you want to do this for a specific reason of having something to share with your own son. And that I think is a big deal. That's like a major point. I think that's going to help overall because you have like I said, a personal stake in it.
Yeah, it's my son is hugely important to House of Fear. For two reasons. The first reason is he actually, the ghost story, Curse of Cottonwood Court, he actually helped me write it. I would sit down with him and say, okay, let's write a scary story together. He came up with the idea of the haunted house, the ghost. He named the characters. When I got stuck with the ending, I couldn't quite figure out how to make it end. I asked him, and he came up with a brilliant solution.
Oh, that's great.
And anytime I have a roadblock, I'll just sit down with him and go, hey, here's the monster. The kids are in this situation. How do they get out? And he just comes up with stuff that I would never think about, but they're perfect for a kid because they're, written for his friends, his age group. So the solution that he comes up with is like, oh, heck yeah, I totally got to use that, So I often have to tweak it or make it work with the story or whatever. But anytime I do have a roadblock in the creative process, I ask him, and he usually comes up with a good idea.
That's great. You have like your own little editor in there to help you out. And
exactly.
I'm sure he's like one of the first people to read the book, right?
Oh, always. Yeah. He's the first one to see the line art, the colors. He's the first one to see pretty much everything.
Wow.
It's great to bounce ideas off of. And I'll be honest, sometimes he's like, oh, are you asking me about your stories again? But, so, I can't go to him every day and say, look, you need to help me with this. But, it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, and like it's something else you could do with your son. So is that part of the reason why, like in the back of one of the issues, it talked about like how hey kids, you can make your own comics. Like here's how you do this.
Yeah, exactly. With my son, I'm, as a writer, I want him to write or at least appreciate story and appreciate how the story comes together.
Mm-hmm.
And as a comic writer, I like to share with him and his friends, and I go around to classrooms every now and then and just show kids how the process works. What, from idea to the pencils, to the colors, to the, all that, the whole process, just to show them, hey, this is how a comic's made. And I get a lot of great feedback. Kids are just, oh, wow, I never thought about a comic being made. Here it is in my hand. So yeah, with my son, I just like to share with, like, even when we watch movies together, I'll point out one or two things just to show after the fact, to remind him that was somebody made those things. Someone wrote it, someone directed it, the actors, a lot of that stuff is CG now, so that there's actually people creating those, spaceships and lasers and Star Wars, that someone actually had to go in and make those things. Yeah. And so it takes the story in another way. He enjoys the story. We can, laugh and shout and get giddy with the excitement, but he also loves to just, watch the special features and see the making of process. So,
I'm sure it could give him a deeper appreciation for, the artistic community there, because and understanding, well, yeah, the people put hard work into this. It didn't just like appear. You don't press a button and it comes out. Like there's time and energy and all this manpower put into creating comics and movies and television shows, all those things.
Oh yeah, and just sharing how long something takes with kids. I was with a class a few months ago, and they were just like, "What? It takes how long to print and how long to ship a comic?" Mm-hmm. Or wait a second, you had this idea 2 years ago, and you just got this printed yesterday? That doesn't make any sense. So it kind of opens their eyes a little bit that you have to put a lot of energy and effort into it and keep it up before you actually see the other side.
Right.
But at the same time, I like to remind them, hey, that you can make a comic right now by yourself on the floor with a piece of paper and a crayon. Yeah. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, this takes years and years, because I don't want to discourage anybody. Mm-hmm. So I kind of remind them about the fun aspects and all that stuff too.
That's great. How often do you do those kind of school visits?
Not as often as I'd like, but I'd say maybe 3 times a year. Mm-hmm. So far. Right now I'm just honestly trying to figure out how to do more of them. I sat down with my son's class. Last year I sat down I had a friend of mine, a teacher at a local school, invited me to a career day. So I sat down with 3 different groups of 5th graders, things like that. And then at at conventions, I'll occasionally do something like that for as a panel, mm-hmm. that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Again, you're getting kids, this is all kind of like a no-brainer for any parent to just be like, look, all right, the kid is interested in reading, they get to read about cool monsters and scary stories without freaking them out too much, and it might, jog the creativity muscles there. So, this is, it's silly for for any parent not to check these books out. It kind of sells itself there.
Yeah, what I like to do when I meet with the kids is, with a comic book, you can write it and draw it, color it, letter it all yourself.
Yeah.
Or you can do any of those pieces, right? Or you can just sit back and read it. So there's so many elements that play into that if I'm in a group of 30 kids, I can find something of interest for all those kids. I like to ask, hey, who likes to color? Who likes to draw? Who likes to read? Who likes to write? And at some point, every kid raises their hand, so I can focus a little bit of the lesson or the class or whatever for each individual, and bring something for that person to enjoy. Even if it's just, hey, I like scary monsters, or I like superheroes. This is what's cool about comics. Yeah. So
now, how has the response been for those kind of things, and then subsequently the response to House of Fear among kids like that?
Well, as far as the kids go, I hear positive feedback all the time, to the point where I wish I could make them much faster. I hand them out at Halloween. My son and I do like a little haunted garage. Mm-hmm. That's honestly, it's getting bigger every year, and it's almost overwhelming at this point. But I make sure to hand out a copy of House of Fear to all the kids in the neighborhood. And whenever some of them, they'll just come up to me as I'm walking my son to school. Hey, when's the next one? Or I'll get an email from a parent saying, hey, when are you doing the next one? My son keeps asking about them, or my daughter is crazy into these. Mm-hmm. And so the kids have responded very well. I actually got an email not too long ago, just a couple of weeks ago. A mom was sending me one saying that her daughter has read so many times that it's falling apart. And that's like, oh, that is the coolest thing I've ever heard.
That's a good problem to have.
Yep, exactly. And then I also have the adults. I actually did a poll with people on my mailing list not too long ago, and I discovered that almost half of my audience are just adults without kids. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to know that I've created something engaging enough that has a story that's got a beginning, middle, and end, and enough drama or enough action or whatever it is that adults are enjoying it too.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a definite place for the all ages comic that it still scratches that itch, and I've backed the past couple Kickstarters myself, and I can see that it's a fun comic. That's the thing. I still have that inner child that still appreciates things like the Goonies or Are You Afraid of the Dark or something like that, and I can understand. Okay, yeah, no, I remember that. I remember that era of my life as it gets farther and farther away, unfortunately. So I think I have an appreciation for it, and being able to share it with my kids is another level to that.
Yeah, I think that sharing it with kids is so amazing because you get to engage with the story yourself on an adult level, but then you get to see it through their eyes. That makes it a whole different realm of enjoyment. No question about that for sure.
Yeah, and then when my kids will enjoy something like that, or like they get into it, and you can see like that excitement, or they'll ask to read it again and again, like those kind of things is just like, it's that like proud dad moment where I'm like, yes, I know you understand this, you're like it all comes together. It's a nice feeling.
Yeah, my son right now is reading the Bone series.
Oh, great!
And my son likes to read, but he's never been. He hasn't found a series of books, comics or otherwise, that he's really just loved. He can't wait to sit down to read it. But Bone is his first. It took me a while to get him interested in that first volume, but once he read that, he was hooked. And we actually just got the last 3 volumes in the mail yesterday, and he immediately sat down and read volume 7. He just stopped talking to me, went to the couch and started reading. And the next thing I know, he's like, all right, I'm done. This was awesome. I can't wait to read volume 8.
That's great.
So yeah, it's great to see. It's great to see. So yeah, and hearing kids and parents talk about House of Fear, and I'm not comparing it to Bone by any means, but to hear that, hey, my son loved it this much that I've seen him, he's reading it all day, or the printed issue is falling apart because he or she's read it so many times.
Yeah.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
And what's cool about comics too is something I realized recently, because some of my stories I write prose first, and then you move them over to a comic script just so I can get the whole story out.
Yeah. And
along that process, I've been kicking around the idea of, well, maybe I should just write a chapter book for that grade, 3rd or 4th grade.
Mm-hmm.
But there's in the back of my head, it's like, I like that idea, but comics, anybody could read a comic for a kid, right? An all ages comic is for everybody, an adult, a kid, a teenager, whatever. But a book, a chapter book for an 8-year-old, a 2nd grader, there's very few teenagers, very few adults who are going to read that book.
Yeah.
Because the language is intended for kids, at a certain reading level. But a comic with the pictures and the dialogue, it's more similar it's closer to a movie in that regard, and everybody can enjoy a Pixar movie. Everybody can enjoy a Disney movie. Now granted, there's some movies out there that are strictly for kids. You watch and you're falling asleep 10 minutes in because it's so dull.
Yeah.
But for the most part, comics, an all ages comic, anybody can read.
Comics are for everybody.
So, yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
No, I was just going to, finish that off to say, so yeah, I keep thinking about writing prose again, but I always fall back to comics because of that ability to attract everybody.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the Halloween, thing, because I put out in the newsletter, I think, that you were like, yeah, like I'll send these out to you. You could buy a number of the issues to give out. I give out old, like some of my old comics from when I was a kid, and they're like the weird, worthless 90s comics, but like, I had a whole bunch of them, and I'm like, you know what, like some kid is gonna see this and be like, oh my god, and it always has such a huge reaction. I don't get a ton of trick-or-treaters at my house, but I get them. We do this like trunk or treat thing where it's like the cars line up in a parking lot at like the community center or something like that, and kids just kind of go around. But like people recognize me year over year, like, you're the comic guy. Oh my god, like, can I get another one? Like, is it? So like I ran out so quickly that I didn't realize, like, so I had to like stock up again, and like blew through like 40 or 50 comics of kids just like inhaling this. I was like, oh my god, there's a comic. Like, I'm like, yeah, like remember, like this is this is where they came from. Like you saw Captain America on TV or on the movies, but like. He was in a comic book first. Like, here he is. And in this one, he's a werewolf. Like, because that was the 90s.
Exactly. Yeah, that's awesome that you do that. I think the trunk or treat aspect of that actually might enhance that because of the way that the parking lot's situated and you're standing at your trunk. People see you, so they recognize you as the comic guy. Kids start to recognize, like with me, I'm hidden in the haunted garage. So they don't necessarily they equate my house to the comic house, but not me as the comic guy. But, so my son was born on Halloween.
Oh, cool. It's even better.
So this is kind of where this all started, to be honest. So when he was born, I've always been into Halloween, but with my son being born, I'm more into it. Mm-hmm. And I'd say when he's 3, probably when he was 3, I started handing out old comics from the 90s, like you were doing. Mm-hmm. But I didn't quite get the reaction I wanted, in part because the 90s, you couldn't always just dip into a comic and enjoy it. They're to be continued, and a lot of those are crazy wordy. Claremont with the X-Men. I mean, his it takes an hour to read one of those comics. So what I did from then is I switched to, I go to comic shops now on Halloween. They have little bundles of 25 comics. There's little mini comics. Yeah. They're usually just reprints of issues that they already have. But what I ran into there, what I didn't like was a lot of the issues were to be continued, or they ended with, to read the rest of the story, go to your comic shop.
Yeah.
Now, that's great for you and me. We can get online, order it, or go to the comic shop anytime we want. But to a kid, hey, I want to read the rest of this story. Where is it? You ask your mom or dad, and you find out that story isn't available at your comic shop, whatever. It's a lot more difficult to find that. So when I started going down the path with House of Fear, that's kind of one of the reasons I focused on standalone stories, with the intent that eventually these will be handed out at Halloween, so that a kid gets that story, goes home with all this candy and a flashlight on Halloween. He can be scared for a little while and get the complete story. That was the reasoning behind all that. And that's one of the reasons my publishing company, or the publisher that publishes these, is 1031. My goal is to print enough of these that I can get to a price point that works, that people will buy them in bundles to hand out instead of candy.
I feel ashamed that I just got that. That was 1031. I was like, I wonder what that means. Is that like an address or something like that? And I'm like, no, idiot, it's Halloween. Like, oh man.
That's good. That was my goal, was to make it subtle enough that it didn't jump out at. So that's actually good that you didn't know. It's a nice little.
Thanks for making me feel better.
Well, I didn't want to just call it Halloween comics or or anything like that. So I do like to hear that. So.
Now, how does all this come together? So you're writing this, but not you haven't written every issue of House of Fear yet, correct?
So as far as I'm concerned, House of Fear is unlimited. I have 3 more scripts written. I have notes for probably 5 more monster stories. I'll keep writing them as long as I can keep making them.
What I meant is, have you written all of the issues to date?
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah. So my friend Brandon, he wrote the Shoggoth one, the Lovecraftian one. We were talking, and he's a huge Lovecraft fan. And I pitched him on the idea. I said, hey, have you ever thought about making a Lovecraft for kids? And, he laughed. It's like, Lovecraft isn't for kids. And it's not. So I talked to him a little bit about it. It's like, well, you don't have to take the darkness or the themes. What about just taking one of the monsters?
Yeah. And
he kicked around some ideas, and he pitched me on the idea of basically what are those things called? I'm drawing a blank.
Sea monkeys?
Yeah, the sea monkeys. Yeah. He, basically grow your own monster, just add water. And it was the Lovecraftian creatures, and we worked on it, and it was awesome. And the next thing I know, he did an issue of House of Fear. So
yeah, I like the that was one of my favorites. I mean, they all work really well, but I think that one was just like fun, and like how silly it was. In that, yeah, you could see the kid sends away for what, like in an old comic for what you think is like sea monkeys, and it turns out to be a Shoggoth. Like that's a nice like little twist to it.
Yeah, I thought Brandon nailed that. Absolutely nailed it. That story came together nicely with a good tease at the beginning, a good middle, and then the ending was rewarding. I thought the art worked really well. And And yeah, even if you're not a Lovecraft fan, I thought that story worked. But if you are a Lovecraft fan, it just adds that extra oomph to the story.
Yeah.
Because because there's a few little Easter eggs in there. Not many, but there's a line or two that kind of, if you're a Lovecraft fan, a diehard, you'll pick those up. Which I like to have in there.
And that's how it works in terms of getting the adults in and getting the kids in. So the kids, it might go over a kid's head, but if an adult is fans of Lovecraft, they'll have a deeper appreciation for it.
Yep, exactly. And it kind of goes back to guiding kids to potentially enjoying something later. So right now Lovecraft is huge. So a lot of parents are fans of Lovecraft. So the idea of getting their kids just to hear the name Lovecraft or the Shoggoth or any of those things and kind of get an idea of what that monster looks like, so that, when they're old enough to read those books, that maybe they'd be more interested.
Yeah, I had sent in for show and tell once for my kid for the letter C. The C is for Cthulhu book from Comics Tribe. And, and they were like, what? So when I picked them up, they were like, no one can pronounce any of these words. Like, what? Where did this come from?
That's awesome.
So I'm like, oh well, you gave it a shot. Thanks. Like, look, I'm sure the kids loved all the pictures and everything, though.
Yeah, that C is for Cthulhu stuff is absolutely fantastic. I think the group of guys are doing an amazing job. They just did another Kickstarter for
a pillow.
For a pillow, yeah. They've done plushies.
Yeah, it was a pillow and a blanket. Yeah, that was the one I was like, I don't know if I could swing this one, but I have the book, the coloring book, the story book, and the plush. So I'm like, all right, we got everything else.
Yep, those are great too, because those are, again, great for kids and adults. The kids may not understand why the parents are enjoying it, but they certainly do. So.
Now, how did you kind of get all these things together? So you're helming this overall brand or series with House of Fear, but so you're from the writing side of it. So how did you get the artists together to finish up the book?
So with the Curse of Cottonwood Court, I just sent a couple of feelers out on social media, a couple of different comic creating forums, and I just said, hey, I'm looking for an artist. Kind of gave an idea of what I was willing to pay, how long, the story was. I got, 200 submissions.
Wow.
And I picked one. I picked one with the art that I liked and someone who communicated well in the email that he sent. So yeah, that's how I went with, for the Curse, and the same with Brandon's book, the Shoggoth book.
One. Yeah.
But then with everything from now on, Jethro Morales is drawing the rest of the series. I kind of like his lines. I like his lines. I've worked with him before. We did my first comic I did years ago. The Boy Who Wanted War was just a thing I wanted to see what I could do, a full comic. Jethro was the artist on that. I liked working with him. And I reached out to him and said, hey, do you want to do an issue? He said yes. And since then, we've decided that he should just do the rest from now on, just to have some consistency and stuff like that. And then, as far as the host of House of Fear, the House of Fear caretaker, Boyle, I hooked up with James Hislop through the colorist, Josh Jensen gave me his name, and I communicated to James via, Facebook. I liked what he did. I liked his style. I pitched him the idea of what the host would look like. We worked on a few things together. And, so yeah, now James is always going to be doing the host. I like the idea of the same artist doing the intro and the afterward pages with the host, and having those be different than the interior pages. Just kind of set it off to show that the host and the comic book story are almost in two different worlds.
Yeah, and it's a nice nod to the classics like Tales from the Crypt, by having that, and like Uncle Creepy kind of character to come in and provide you with some context and a fun little kind of joke to to either introduce the book, the story, or kind of like send you out. So it's a nice little addition there.
Yeah, I like him quite a bit, and he's the more we write him, or I write him, and James draws him. We're kind of honing in on his personality some, and so he's kind of got a messed up. One side of his face is kind of messed up with boils, and it looks like it was burned, and it's just nasty. So over time, we've kind of made it so that when he introduces the story, he's just this nice gentleman. He's like a butler of an old house. But then after the story, he shows his mean side, which is the nasty side, but his personality changes. He's kind of mean.
Yeah.
So I kind of like the idea of a host who has a split personality, and that matches his face and his appearance. So I really like how that's coming together.
Yeah, no, like I said, it's a fun thing, and again, a nod back to those classics like that. What about Kickstarter? So you've had a couple under your belt now. So you feel good with the platform. It seems like it's working for you. How has Kickstarter treated you, I guess, so far?
So it's great. I'm a huge fan of Comics Launch.
Yeah.
With Tyler and what he's doing. I before that first campaign, I listened to every single Comics Launch podcast twice. I mean, I spent almost, I would say, a year before I dove in and launched.
Did the homework. There you go.
I wanted to know everything I could. I had notes everywhere. To be honest, to some degree, I went overboard. You just actually, at some point, you just have to go do it and learn from experience. But Tyler James with Comics Launch was huge for me. And then, I did the first one. I emailed everyone I knew. I said, hey, here's what it is. Here's what Kickstarter is. Cause a lot of people don't know what, Kickstarter is, what it is. And, I learned a lot. The first campaign, wow, it took a long time to make that page the way I wanted it. Creating that video was difficult just because I didn't know how to use the software. And I'm terrible, absolutely terrible in front of a camera. I mean, my wife would hold the camera and, the video camera, and just, it was awful. At one point, she just left. She goes, you can do it. You have to do this yourself. I've been down here for 3 hours. We haven't gotten through one take. So after that first one, I learned a lot. And then the second one came a lot easier. I had a little bit of an audience, which helped. From the first one, I had a success. Everybody got their comic on time and enjoyed the comic. So the second one was a little bit easier. And actually it was almost a little bit easier too, because Brandon wrote that second one.
Yeah.
I think other writers and artists can appreciate this. It's hard to sell yourself because you kind of want to be shy and put your head down and say, oh, here's my comic,
Yeah, and I guess there's a line between like, all right, now you just seem like you're bragging. If you're like, this is the best thing I've ever done. Like, all right, tone it down there.
Exactly. But it was a lot easier to hype up brand and stuff because A, I liked it, but B, it wasn't me. Mm-hmm. So I actually learned a lot on how to market a book and how it should feel. Because I was pitching Brandon's story, which I think will help me with my next one or at cons to know that, hey, if I can do that for a comic I didn't write, I can also do that for something I did write with that same energy and excitement. So, as far as what's next, I do have some plans for Kickstarter right now. I'm just trying to figure out exactly which way to go. I have a few options. I actually have most of my page designed for the next one, at least how I want it mapped out and some of the images I want to use, because I have enough. I have enough stories right now that I can do a launch for 1 or 2 single issues. I'm toying with the idea of doing one for more of a collected volume that collects five issues, but. I'm still up in the air. I'm up in the air with that right now. So,
but I mean, regardless, it sounds like more House of Fear is coming. You're figuring out which shape that's going to be in first.
Exactly. Yep, I have, let's see, three stories are 100% finished. 2 have actually been released. Right now, Matt is lettering Dead Lake. So that's almost done. I have a really short story that I'm hoping that would be, published in, another edition of the Attack of the Killer Snowman issue. I have an 8-page story about leaves. Which is if I can make something.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like so like. Well, it's about leaves. Like, okay, like go on.
So yeah, idea just came to me one day. It's just leaves, fall leaves, and making that scary. And I think it actually worked really well. It's a tight story with very minimal dialogue, and if that last page works, I think. Kids will second guess jumping into leaf piles from now on. Then Jethro is starting to do character designs on a story just called Teeth, which is a scary story about the Tooth Fairy.
Oh, yep, that's prime for a horror treatment right there.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that one. I'm excited about all of them, but I'm learning that my skills as a scriptwriter are improving. And I feel that Teeth is everything's come together with that one. I think I have the scares. I have a little bit of humor. I think I have better direction to Jethro. It's just as far as, the script writing goes. And that one's that's a longer one too. That's 32 pages. So it's nice to see a slightly longer story come together. And if Jethro draws what I think he will with the Tooth Fairy, I think it's going to be fantastic. I can't wait to see what he comes up with.
Are there other like monsters or characters that you're like from the horror genre that you're looking forward to exploring further? I know you said you have witches coming up, but you had some Lovecraft in previous ones, but it seems like you can kind of do this about anything almost.
Yeah, absolutely anything. At the Denver Comic Con the last 2 years, I actually had this giant board, one of those giant Post-it notes, and I had the words, "What are you afraid of?" written on it. And I had kids and adults come up and just write what they're afraid of. And I tabulated all those things. So now I probably have a list of 500 different things people are scared of. And, some of them are, horror tropes, zombies and vampires and stuff like that. Other ones are spiders is huge. Spiders is huge. And actually, I'm almost finished with a script about spiders that the reason I'm not finished yet is because I'm not sure if it's too scary. There's a few elements in there that I can't tell if I've gone overboard or not. In my head, I'm like, I don't want my son to see this, but maybe it would work. I don't know. I haven't decided. No, like you said earlier, it's not decapitation, it's no blood, it's just spiders. But at the same time, if you're scared of spiders, there's a certain scene I don't know if you should read.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty common fear too. So it's I'll be curious how that kind of can play out and what the reaction to that might be.
Exactly. And but yeah, I mean, what I do, I have an 8-year-old and he has friends. So what I do is just watch them play. And a lot of times in the back of my head, it's like, how can I make that scary? How can I make a swing set scary? How can I make a pile of leaves scary?
Yeah.
So my goal is I don't know if I even want to call it a goal. It's just something in the back of my head. I want to do some stories with classic monsters that you would expect kids to be dressed as on Halloween, but also do some other weird stuff that's totally unexpected. Like an alien invasion. Well, that might be more of a trope too, I guess, but just random stuff that kids interact with on a regular basis, and see how I could turn that into something scary.
Yeah, and like as a parent, I think like there are aspects to that might be scarier to you. Like, you might see a swing set and think like, oh, my kid could fly off of that and, you know, break his head open or something like that. Whereas a kid could see it, and that's a very, like, real kind of parent fear. Whereas a kid might just see it and go like, no, that's something I could, you know, leap over to fight a monster, or, you know, or the thing could come alive and you know, we have to attack it or something like that. Like, it's an entirely separate set that, like, all right, if it's still aimed as the kids, like, all right, well, how do you make it from the kid thing? But the fact that you have, like, your own built-in focus group for all those kind of things is a great way to be like, hey, let me just run this by you, kids. You know, put the toys down for a second. Let's just talk about this.
Yep, exactly. You know, sometimes my friends or my son's friends will be over, and I'll just quickly pop my head in while they're playing. Hey, would you guys be scared of this? And I'll give them a 2-second pitch on a story idea. Mm-hmm. And if they just laugh, then it's like, okay, back to the drawing board. But if they're like, oh, that sounds awesome, then yeah, I know I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
But kind of go back to what we were saying with the snowman issue. We were talking about kids just kind of daydreaming. You know, you might be building a snowman and having a little fantasy in your head. Mm-hmm. Who knows? You know, you might be on a swing set and imagine that that's a spaceship and you're preparing for launch or whatever. So in theory, there could be a scary story about that that's no longer, it looks like a swing set, but maybe there's something underneath the ground and it's part of an alien spacecraft. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just making that up, but every single thing a kid can do can turn into a scary adventure story.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll tell you, like, when I'm driving my kids to daycare in the morning, half the time they imagine the car is a spaceship and we have to, like, fight through, you know, asteroids and aliens and space pirates to get to our moon school. So it's like, you know, it's a fun way to pass, like, the 5-minute commute over there, but, like, you know, they have a lot of fun with it. And then half the time the aliens are made out of marshmallows and they can just eat them, and the other half they have to shoot them with lasers. So either way, they have awesome. A blast. Yeah.
That is awesome. I dig that. Don't be surprised if that appears somewhere down the line in a House of Fear story. I love the idea of, you know, you could eat an alien like a marshmallow.
Yeah,
I dig that.
I don't know. I don't know where that came from. And it's like, I try to trick them every so often. I'm like, oh, they're like, these are made out of, and I'm like, broccoli. And they're like, no. No, they're not. They're like,
no way, Dad.
They're definitely not made of broccoli. They're made of chocolate, and we're going to eat all of them.
Like, yeah, exactly. Although vegetables could be a scary story in and of itself.
Very true. Although, like, you know, I feel like you have to be careful with that too, because, like, you don't want to get that home. It's like, thanks, I was having a hard enough time with getting my kid to eat vegetables, and now he's never going to eat them because you turn them into monsters. Like, we had
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, like, I mean, I don't have any, like, specific proof of this, but there was a book a couple years ago from Dave Schecht and Jess Smiley, I think is the artist. They did called Spooky Sleepover, where it's like an all ages fun kids book, but the middle story was about, like, a haunted toilet. And I happened to get it as my oldest was, like, potty training. I'm like, I don't know if it delayed his potty training at all from, like, a fact that, like, a toilet would eat a plumber, but, like, I'm like, you know, maybe this wasn't a great idea in hindsight to show him that particular story at the time. But I mean, he reads it now and, like, loves it. So it's like one of those things where he's like, it's in, like, constant rotation that he'll want to read regularly. So it's like, all right, he got over it. Whatever. If he did have any issues with it, it was fine.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to look into that. That was Spooky Sleepover. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna have to look into that.
It was an anthology book. So there were, like, there were 3 stories, but the idea was, like, it was a sleepover where these, you know, kids are sharing scary stories. And then, like, so there's, like, a beginning, there's, like, interstitials of the kids telling these stories and stuff. So it's, like, it's fun, you know, quirky kind of artwork, and just, like, the other ones are, like, a haunted bike where, like, a kid, you know, a kid's friend passes away and he goes to, like, you know, remember him by putting his bike next to, like, I guess where he died, and someone steals the bike, and then these ghosts come and help him steal the bike back. And then another one is just a hungry werewolf. The werewolf's like, man, I really want to eat, like, pizza. And these kids, like, find him in the woods. They're like, come on, like, we'll give you all the leftovers and stuff. And, like, you know, they're just, like, this fun little story of them, you know, feeding this werewolf instead of them being eaten. But, yeah, like that.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, those are the kind of things, like, you know, there's a place for books like that, to have, your, you know, all ages kind of kids books, that still introduce horror and play with those horror tropes, and, yeah, and they can really enjoy it. So, like, my kids eat that up and they just love it, unconditionally. So it's a great feeling.
Yeah, I think that's a great age group for wonder. And, I think to some degree just calling something scary turns people off.
Yeah.
But these stories, I mean, to a kid, some of these stories can be scary. You joke that, maybe you showed the scary toilet too early to your son, but, there's an element of entertainment of being scared. You're in the safety of your own home and maybe in bed with a flashlight or whatever. I like the idea of being entertained. Show a kid that you can be a little scared at home in the safety of your own room and learn to enjoy being frightened.
Yeah.
I think there's something fun about that. As long as it's not overboard. It's pretty clear when you watch a movie, say, and a dark scene comes on, it's pretty obvious that a kid is overwhelmed. You might have to close their eyes or fast forward or whatever. But, for a comic, they can, close the comic. They can turn off the flashlight. They can do anything to stop it if they actually got scared.
Yeah,
but
they can skip the page. It's all flexible in that way. They're in full control over how they're being exposed to that.
Yeah. And I think, the way I've done House of Fear, and I'm assuming, a lot of other books, like, this spooky sleepover, I'm sure is the same, is that they're all kid protagonists. So the reader can sort of relate.
Mm-hmm.
A kid is, involved in saving the day or defeating the monster. So the reader is kind of getting a sense of power. An 8-year-old goes to school, has to listen to the teacher, comes home, has to listen to mom and dad.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have a story where there's none of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of evil snowmen that the kid has to destroy to save the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I think that there's something cool about having a kid protagonist save the day or not save the day even, if that's the case for a scary story. So.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, you're doing some great work here. If the first couple issues of House of Fear are any indication, so definitely looking forward to the future of House of Fear in whatever shape or form it takes. But the existing issues are available now. Where are the best places for folks to pick those up?
So right now I'm actually working on a new store on my website, 1031publishing.com. I'm not exactly sure how quickly I can get that turned around, but the easiest route is on Comixology. If your listeners are into Comixology and digital comics, that's the easiest way to get quick access to them. There's 3 issues up right now, and they're all 99 cents each. So a pretty simple way for you to test the waters and see what you think.
Yeah.
And then anyone can reach out and get a printed copy from me too, just by a simple email. James at 1031publishing.com. And I'm just saying that in case my store is not updated. Mm-hmm. It's surprising how with technology, a lot of things super easy. Like in theory, creating a web store is super easy, but there's a lot of back end stuff that I'm not technologically savvy enough to figure it out easily, or I don't like the idea of, having a third party get credit card information or taking most of the profits.
Yeah.
I shouldn't even say profit. Just if I'm trying to sell a PDF for $1 and whatever group I use for the store takes 60% of that, I would rather have someone just come to me and have it for free almost. So.
Yeah, it's stuff like that has to be like. I feel like there's many ways for people, indie creators to be taken advantage of in that. So, fortunately, I think it's getting better. But there's still a major learning curve for like everyone involved in those kind of things. Is it, the best places to find you would that be the 1031publishing.com, or are you on Twitter or anything?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, but I don't use Twitter quite as much. And to be honest with you, I'm cutting back on Facebook too.
Well, they've been in the news lately, so there's a lot of reasons to do that.
It's social media is just such a big it just sucks your time away
Yeah.
without you even noticing. And I have very little free time, and I want to use as much of that as possible on creating comics. So, but I am definitely there. If anybody wants to reach me, I have a 1031 page on Facebook, or you can just reach out to me via Facebook in a message or whatever works, or friend me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty easy to get a hold of there.
Cool. All right, James, this has been really fun. I'm so glad we had a chance to talk. And like I said, I'm generally excited for House of Fear, and I put my money where my mouth is on this show, and that like I don't have people on that I'm not backing their projects too, so I do put my some skin in the game there. So definitely encourage folks to check out House of Fear, and it seems like you have a lot of ways that people can check it out easily and quickly to get exposed to the book. So but yeah, thank you.
My goal for the year is to make it even easier.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, as far as like the web store, part of me is kind of holding off on making that a big priority for me until I have a few more, like at least one more issue on there.
Yeah.
Just to cut down, if nothing else, to cut down on shipping on a printed copy.
Yeah,
I don't want to send one copy of a comic for $3 and shipping's $4. I'd rather send, 4 issues, for $5 shipping
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. So before we roll though, let me ask you a question. Let's just say you had an iPad with House of Fear on it. Would you share that with your kids, or do they just read printed?
So it's a little both. So like they totally understand the concept of swiping and reading like that. But when I'm reading, I've tried to read with them a few times in it. I mean, they're younger too. So I mean, they're my oldest just turned 5. So when he reads, or like when he looks at something like that, he gets that, all right, if I go like this, the pages are going to move real fast. So like all of a sudden we're at the end of the comic. I'm like, but you just enjoyed doing that. And like, we got to like look at this more. I think that's getting better. Cause and honestly, I haven't tried it again recently. I've taken him to like free comic book day and stuff like that. So he gets to pick out some stuff, and he'll, understand and like read through it, and look at all the pictures. And I try to get him to tell me what he thinks is going on. So it's like, look at the pictures. I understand like you don't know quite how to read yet, but like, let's look at what you think is actually happening in here, and like you tell me what the story is. So I think that's getting his mind thinking that way. But I think either way. I think what ends up happening though, at least early on, is the print copies are more, and then they like to wrap their heads around what a digital thing is something that I think comes in a little bit at an older age. At least that's what I've seen so far.
No, yeah, and I agree. I think I like to get feedback from parents who are in that situation with 5 to 8, 10-year-old.
Yeah.
My son, who's 8, has some friends who have their own iPads or have access to them relatively easy. But other kids who have, know what an iPad is, but has never really even touched one. So I'm just curious, as far as, for me trying to get my books into more readers' hands,
Mm-hmm.
the PDF or a Comixology type thing is super easy, is super inexpensive. But because my end audience is typically kids, I'm not sure if digital is the way to go necessarily.
Well, it's always a good way to start and to kind of like get in there and at least, because there will be a segment to it. Like I'm a big believer in digital comics, and I always get annoyed when I see that a Kickstarter doesn't at least offer a digital option, because it's like, that doesn't cost you anything to email me a PDF, so it's like just put that in there as a good exposure to start things out. But I'll try it again either way. I do have copies of the first 2 issues. I just have to dig them up. I don't know they're in my office somewhere. And like I'm literally going through like this little long box I got in here, or short box, excuse me. Now, and I'm like, did I put them in here? Because if so, I'll take these out, and I'll email you the feedback I get when I read them to them later.
Awesome. That sounds great. To be honest, one of the things I'm kicking around is doing a digital only Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. Just to kind of expand my reach, and it's a super easy way, like you said, for people to sample. But again, I'm just sure if there's enough kids out there who would read digital, or parents that would let them read digital. So,
well, I think
we'll see. That's something I'm kicking around.
I think, like you said, that there is an audience that, there are kids that have digital that have their own iPads and stuff like that, and like they're used to that. I mean, we give my son an older phone that like the battery's kind of shot, so he basically gets to play with it until the batteries die, and then he knows like, all right, well, my time's up, and I got to put this away. So that worked out for us. But like he's very intuitive in using that, and like, okay, like this is how I close out an app or go and play a different game or something like that. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. I think, and there's, to some degree, you parent in a bubble. You have your kid and maybe some close friends, so you assume everybody's like that. But in reality, you have no idea what everyone down the street or in other states or countries are doing. Yeah. So that's a good point. So awesome.
All right, that about does it for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson with my guest James Powell. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.